She said, Tamra, what got you here is not going to get you there. And
Mm,
so you might feel good, but what if you felt great? And your understanding of what good feels like is only because you've had these compounding issues that you have just taken as the new norm, taken as the new norm, taken as the new norm. It's like today, who I am is going to be really different than who I am 3 years from now. And that doesn't make me any less important than where I am now in this moment. In fact, it gives me hope to what I get to be later. But I have to show up in excellence in order for my valuation to be of my inner self rather than validation from other people.
Welcome back to the podcast. And I am so enthusiastic about our podcast today because we have our first repeat guest. You may remember her with the roundtable with Rachel Luna. We have Tamra Andress back today.
So
And
excited to be here. I'm so
I'm
excited.
so
That was
happy
such
for
a
you
good
to be here.
conversation. So this is going to be awesome to follow up with.
Yeah, so this new series that we're doing and why I instantly was gravitated to you is all about what am I doing differently this year? Because I don't want the same like nuts and bolts, right? I don't want the fluff stuff. I
Yeah.
want to be talking about on the podcast and every time we're teaching or speaking or we're on stage or even at our conference in September, the fluff stuff. I want the stuff that actually works, that's going to move the needle in people's lives, that's going to resonate so deeply with them and make a difference because, we're more the same than we are different.
For sure.
And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what are you doing differently this year? But our story goes way back to us both putting ourselves in a room, maybe like 2019-ish.
Yeah. 2019. Yeah, I would say that's
Some
right.
Somewhere about there. And before we started the podcast, I was saying that, she was there supporting an event and I was speaking at an event and I had bought I think it was a Free People t-shirt or tank top or something from you. I still have it. It like has a rainbow on it. So like kind of worn
Yes.
off a little bit. But I just remember your energy was so infectious and we've stayed connected ever since then and done some collabs and things together. And so I'd love for you to just share a little bit about not only what you're doing differently this year, we'll talk about that, but share with us like that transition that you've gone through. Some of
Yeah.
that. Where did you start and where are you at now?
Yeah, it's so wild because I'm writing a book right now and it's sharing a lot of these pieces because I think oftentimes we forget and people will come
Mm.
to us like, "Oh, Carmen, I want to do everything that you're doing. I want to speak around the world and I want to host these events and all of this." And they're like, "Yeah, but do you want to do, John Maxwell says this, to be like I am, you have to do what I did." And I think that there is a lot of people who forget, even ourselves, we forget what we did. We forget the small milestones. I can literally put myself in that exact room where we met and that table that at the time felt like amazing. I was so proud of it. But looking back on it, I'm like, oh my gosh, Tamra, that was so elementary. There was so much you didn't know what you were doing, but I was just willing. And I think that's something for anybody listening. If you're just willing to take that small step, it's not going to look like the end goal. The vision that you've been given, it's not going to have that fruition factor until you take those small breadcrumbs and you keep doing it and you keep iterating. If we stop before we even get started, I think that's often people's problems because they're like, I have a perfection problem, right? Perfectionism, people pleasing. We have that achievement driven. We want that to happen fast. I've realized along this process that if I release my control, which is something I'm consistently doing, and I allow the process to actually meet me and for me to meet myself in the process, meaning the identity work, the deep ideation work of who are you becoming in the process of you building, because God is way more interested in your character development than he is about the thing that you're doing, even your mission. I could go
Oh
into so
my
many
gosh.
places, but I'll pause.
So much there. Yeah. I was just sharing last week that life is just all about building our character. And how
Yes.
fun is that, right? That we can look at, I made this whole like huge list of all these character traits, physical, emotional, mental, like all these character traits. And then it's like, oh, what are the things that served us in the last
Yeah.
season? But we actually want to let go of that so that we can step into what's next for us and what is the character trait that we need to build in the next, and
Yeah.
not looking at it as a loss or not looking at it like a chore, but being excited about it, being
Yeah.
excited about what's coming. And you said something about remembering what we did in the past.
Mm.
And I think all too often when we step into something new, we forget about the expertise and the celebrations and the wins that we built in the past, because we are experts in certain areas. And just because we're being a beginner again in something doesn't mean that everything, all that experience that we had previously goes away. We get to take it with us. And so I'll ask people to share about their experience. And it's like, well, I'm new at this. Well, no, like what's your expertise? For
Yes.
a while, I never played up that I spent 16 years in corporate leadership. And like, that is a huge part of me. I am an ingrained leader. That is part of me, and that is part of my expertise. And once you marry that with which you are stepping into, that's really where the magic
Yeah.
happens. That's how you're building your character and your identity and what's really inside of you. It's not like just all the way letting go and forgetting about your wins or forgetting about
Yeah.
the experiences that you had. And I love that John Maxwell quote, to get
Yeah.
what I have, you have to do what I
What I
did.
did.
Yeah, you got to put
Yeah.
in the reps. You got to
Yes.
so
Yeah, you're
talk
like,
to us.
okay, so you want to be a speaker. So have you spoke at the local coffee shop? Have you done all the free gigs? Have you gone to the places that you're like, I have no idea who's going to be in the room, and four people show up and you present like there's 4,000 people in the room, right?
Mhm.
That's just the speaker context of what we do. I would say even since that day that we've been together, the iterations that have happened in my business, I started as a business coach, and I could have easily had imposter syndrome. And I'm sure there were days that I did, but I had 10 years of support in business. I had started 9 different companies in my 20s, right? A lot of people don't know that story. So they just are like, oh, she's just a business coach, like teaching people from one lens. But I had e-commerce stores. I had a brick and mortar store. I had done probably every genre of MLM that you could think of. I had a personal training company and a nutritionist experience for people. And so it's just the process of all of that that has then led to me opening a publishing house. I can't opening a publishing house unless I love to read. And I've written several books at this point. And so as I was going and doing that, I was recognizing where the problems were in the industry, which is just us being awoke to what's happening around us and having our eyes open, not about what's in it for me, but how can I serve other people through this sometimes valley experience, because that's often what it feels like when you feel like you're blazing a trail and you're pioneering something. It's dark, you feel alone, you feel a little crazy, everyone's looking at you like, which way are you going? Come over here. This is not the path of least resistance, is the one we've already plowed. But I have found that favor follows friction. And if we can focus on the areas where there's tension, not a tension in a bad way, but you know that there is something on the other side of said door, and you're willing to push into that because you know that there's a promise there, holy cow, it is so worth it. And oftentimes that happens in quiet places, not in main stage arenas.
That was so good. Favor follows friction. So we did a podcast that released this week as we're recording this, and it was with a friend that you introduced me to, Justin Rothling's chauffeur, and he
Yay.
says that you need to have a good amount of intention in what you're doing. And
Mhm.
intention, the root word of it is intention. having
Good.
having that tension in those moments and being able to push through even when you feel like you're alone, you're in the valley, people are looking at you crazy, you don't know all the next right steps.
Yeah.
But I know having that, and you have such a strong conviction inside, that when we start looking too much externally for validation, like, what do you do in those moments? How do you turn back in? And then how do you turn it back around to be compelled again yourself and like really go for a vision that maybe you haven't enlisted very many people with yet?
Yeah, what a great question. I think the thing that's coming to my mind is something that my pastor says, and it's around validation and valuation. And our value doesn't come from other people. It comes from who we innately are. And so if we can resonate and stay in that space of resonance, then we actually become a magnet to all of the things that we are putting our hand to, meaning that people see the favor because we've pressed through and they're like, man, I want the fruit on her life. I want more joy. I want that magnetic energy. I want that overflow of abundance mindset. I want to have that peace that she has, even though she's doing hard things. I want to have, I hate work-life balance, so let's go with alignment. I want to have the alignment in all of the different facets of my life. And the way in which people get drawn into what you're doing is you are displaying that in confidence. And I think that's the quality that a lot of people forget is they're so focused on what they're doing, even if it's in goodness, good works, all of that, and they forget to share it with other people. And so a big part of my journey has been being really open with where I'm at in that season and empowering people to do the same. So when we were brought into the idea of starting a nonprofit, and I was looking to how have I lived my life the last several years, even prior to this business, there was an incubator season. And that incubator season was something that happened inside of our home for 2.5 years. And we realized that there was a catalyst out of that place for other people to start their businesses, to start their nonprofits, to start their missions, having zero intention of that being what that incubator season was like. And so if you look back on your life, if you look into the hindsight, you will have all of that forethought to where you're going moving forward. And you can actually curate something really beautiful for other people to learn. So instead of us always being like, well, what's next? Well, what's next? Well, what's next? Just like I said, are you celebrating the things of the past? Have you actually taken the last, let's say, 3 years of your life and looked at the rhythms, looked at the methodologies, looked at the planning, look at the execution, look at the good that has happened out of it and how you fought past the hard? And you can actually take that and create a framework and teach people around it today, right? Because you have gone through it. It's not something where we sit around and Carbon are like, what's the world need? Who's the avatar? Those are things that traditional business coaches are telling you to do to build something. And that is so fixated on the validation of others versus the valuation that has happened as you have become. That's why my book is called Always Becoming. It's like today who I am is going to be really different than who I am 3 years from now. And that doesn't make me any less important than where I am now in this moment. In fact, it gives me hope to what I get to be later. But I have to show up in excellence in order for my valuation to be of my inner self rather than validation from other people.
So good. I love that. I always think of like in science when they're doing physical studies on the body, they always call it an N of one when it's like one person doing a study for themselves. And I think of that as like my life is like building character as an N of one study. And what am I learning from this? And you're so right that basically we teach what we need to learn the most. And so once we've been through it and once we've learned it, the number one way to really solidify it, people always ask, how are you so consistent and how do you sustain it? Well, I'm consistent and disciplined and I do that. Yes. But then when you teach it to someone else, it could be anyone, then you're like, oh yeah, I've got this. And you're building accountability too. But I want to go back to something that you said is this idea of an incubator season. Could you share with us an example of like what an incubator season was like for you? Like where were you at and what were you kind of going through? And then what beauty came out on the other side?
Absolutely. So after that season and that stint of those businesses I alluded to in my 20s, I came to a halting point where I just couldn't do it anymore. The American dream, the whole facade of it did not fulfill. And I had choices on where do I want to go moving forward. We all do. And a lot of times we think we don't have a choice because we put ourselves in some rooted system, some corporate 9 to 5, some rat race, right? That says you have to stay here in order to keep your head above water. But that's simply not true because even under a financial understanding or obligation, there's so many more resources that are bountiful that we have our hands connected to if we open our eyes. People being one of those things. So I decided for a 3-year season. I didn't know it was going to be 3 years, so I didn't set out for that. I just thought I was quitting all of my jobs, all of my responsibilities beyond being a wife and a mom. And that looked like me going to a lot of therapy. in full transparency and doing the deep work, understanding how to communicate with my husband, how to communicate with others, how to even communicate with my own emotions based on what I was walking through. It also incorporated me doing a couple of certifications. I got my ordination and minister's licensing around leadership at that point. I was a really amazing stay-at-home mom during that season and just poured into my babies who were both under the age of 2 at that time when they started that 3-year stint. And ultimately, I got plugged into people. And people that were healthy in mindset, people that were pursuing something greater than themselves, people that were not on this rat wheel that people often are on. And they understood what it meant to rest, and they didn't need anything from me. That was one of the biggest things. I think we oftentimes plug ourselves into communities who have expectations around you before you've even sat in the chair. And so for me not to have anything to give in that season, I was at my lowest of lows in my life. All I had was the ability to show up. I was really good at showing up. And honestly, I had 2 ears. I had not a lot to say, which is shocking because I have 3 podcasts now and I talk all the time. My son literally was like, I don't know why you get paid, Mom. You just talk all day. I'm like, touche, you're totally right. So processing that in that season, I had nothing to give and everything to gain, but so many people allowed me to give portions of myself that I still had intact. And it was a beautiful season. After that 3-year time frame, I finally felt like I had passions that reignited that I hadn't really explored since I was a child. I had a solid relationship with my husband that if I decided I wanted to go and travel the world or go do something with other people, that I felt really safe and he felt safe in that leaving and not necessarily being in the same space. I felt really secure as a mom after going back into the workforce and starting the entrepreneurial endeavor, which Lord knows that's more hours than the 9 to 5. Why we do that, don't ask, because we're passionate. And so it was a really sweet season, but I was not in the public eye. I was not talking out loud to other people. It was very all intimate quarters. And without that season, I would not have the empathy to be able to help other people go from silence to vocation. And that's something I'm really passionate about now.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that so openly and honestly. Isn't it beautiful, just the reflection back to you of building that strong foundation, that home foundation, and not having to rush that so that when you do step out and you do start using your voice and using your gifts and impacting the lives of others outside of your family, that foundation is still there and it can still be made a priority. You called it alignment earlier. I like to call it integration, just integrating how we're serving or working with our home life, with our priorities, and figuring that out. And you were able to have that strong foundation, because without it, what happens is we go off one way and then we realize, oh, our relationships are suffering.
Yeah.
I am not showing up as the mom, the wife, the sister, the daughter, the cousin, the whatever friend that I want to be showing up. And it's really hard to unwind that. So I love that. So
I was just going to say, I think the world presents that as the right way to live. They present that external validation. They present that external resourcing. They present being vocal. They present all these things that are outside and they're not focused on the intimate nucleus. And so if we can do that first, or you can show up like me and have a dead halt screeching stop, which I like to call my quarter life crisis, and I'll never have to have a midlife one, thankfully, because of it, hopefully, prayerfully, is this knowledge point that if we have that safety space, we are spending, let's just do the average, a third of our life doing our vocation, practicing in our profession, a third of our life sleeping. Hopefully you're getting good sleep. That's important. And a third of your life with these other people in these other places, often if you're married or with children in that space during that long-winded season of 18 years while they hopefully dwell in your home. And if that other third, whether it's sleep, and often if the profession isn't going well and the relationships aren't going well, the sleep isn't going well. If that one thing is not intact, everything else is going to eventually have to be focused on.
For sure. So from that journey, then what stemmed from that? And then let's talk about like how that led to today. And we can talk about even today with the success that you're having with your publishing company, with your books, with your event, FounderCon, that happens every November, with your other podcasts, with everything that you're doing. What are you even doing differently this year too? So, but take us back to what was that next step that you took in order to build to where you're at today?
Yeah, the very literal next step, which was the first part that catalyzed my business, was I actually brought a room of 30 women together that didn't know each other with this like incognito text message that I sent right before the new year of 2019 when we met later that year. And I basically said, "Are you tired of living life the same year by year? Are you tired of the race? Are you tired of not living into your passions and your hobbies or your greatest potential? Come to this room and we're going to figure this out together." And so I had 100% show up rate to that space. I only expected 10 people to come. I sent the message to 30, and the room was only capable of holding 10 people at a table. Instead, we had 30 people filled in this tiny little space, and I shared about what I was going to go on this adventure, essentially of developing a new business. And I wanted them to come alongside if they had a passion that they wanted to bring and make extra money in the process of their year. And it became a membership program that then led to group coaching, that then led to retreats out of the country, that then led to one-on-one coaching, this publishing house. Some of them, actually, one of them I'm thinking of specifically right now, was with me in that room on 2019. And next week, I get to go to her quitting and cocktail party as she is quitting her corporate career, and her full-time endeavor will now be the business that we launched in that room, which is no longer even a room that we're able to go to because it was an old office. And I just think about that and I process out, it was just the daily yes that happened after that season where the Lord had shown me that there was something more. And the biggest part and biggest lesson that I learned of all of it was that it doesn't have to do with me, that it's actually not about me. And when I came to that, though I had done the inner work and that me season was really critical, when I came back into the ethos of community, when I came back into the ethos of others, I realized, wow, my purpose is not to fulfill me. My purpose is to fulfill the mission on my life so that other people can be blessed through me. And that shift of energy, that shift of connectivity, that shift of intentionality, even just eye contact becomes a total different thing when you're actually in it for the other person and you're not in it for yourself. It is beautiful. It is wonderful. I have seen more tears than I have smiles. That might sound to some like, oh gosh, but you'll see hopefully in the room when we're at Amplify Your Life conference later this year is just what happens when someone can see you without ever knowing you is one of the most profound gifts that I think we have as a humanity. And so that's something I'm even focused on this year and doing differently again, Carmen, is I started in my very local community. And right before COVID happened, the Lord told me I was going to take my podcast and I was going to take this thing national. I had no idea how that was going to happen. Insert Clubhouse in December of 2019, right before COVID, which was this audible, I think it's still alive, social media platform where people just talk nonstop and had chat rooms that were live vocally. And I got really integrated into that place. And prior to COVID happening, I was meeting people around the world, having them on my podcast. And I was basically booked out for months on who these people were going to come to fill these seats and to fill coaching seats and all of these things that I was hopeful for. And that's only by the grace of God that he was able to give me that intuition prior to that happening. But now, fast forward 5 years, I have really felt the call to my neighbors. I have really felt the call to come back local, to host more local events rather than going all over the country or the world with these different events that I go to and teach at. So that's one of the reasons why FounderCon is being hosted in my hometown this year. I really want to serve the people that are my neighbors that I get to see every day rather than having them fly to other places to come and do an event with me.
I love that so much. We're always so aligned. I know when I was on your podcast, I started talking about having seasons or letting go of drinking alcohol, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, that's something that I haven't really talked about." But I've done that too, and I feel a really big call with living in Miami Beach for 4 years. Most of the work that I do is outside of South Florida, and I've been really integrating myself and building relationships. And I know it doesn't happen overnight, and bringing and amplifying local businesses there and doing meetups and things like that, because I really want to make a difference in my home where I live. So we're definitely aligned on that. So because you mentioned FounderCon, could you tell us just a little bit about that and when that is? Because
Yeah,
that's going to be November after the Amplify Your Life conference, right? Which
that's
all of
right.
you that are attending, Tamara is going to be speaking at the Amplify Your Life conference. And so you don't want to miss her. But tell us
Yeah.
about FounderCon.
Yeah, it's November 7th and 8th. This is our fourth annual conference, and you're in the throes of conference building now. It is not for the faint of heart. So we're so
Right.
grateful that you're bringing everybody into the room later this year. But it is something that I am so passionate about, and it's giving people an opportunity to integrate their faith and their business. It's this collision zone where people who often think that that's like a Sunday thing or a secret practice or a private practice that is actually meant to go to the masses. And if we can learn how to integrate our faith in our business, I think the world will have a lot less problems, and we will have a lot more of that positive ethos in the world to connect and really serve each other well. So there's going to be workshops. It's a workshop style event where people are coming in and they are really putting the hands to the plow of their businesses. They're really analyzing what they've done in the last year and what they plan to do in the next year. How are they going to grow and scale to the next numbers, to the next infrastructure, to the next system that they need. And it's a really profound place to come and just be and to rest and really find a reignite in who they are individually. The gift that God gave me in that incubator season I mentioned and then catalyzed into coaching was something we've alluded to this entire time, but it's this 3 Venn diagram trifecta of being before brand and business. And oftentimes we can get stuck in the branding and the marketing of it all, the social media world. We can get stuck in the business development and the acumen and the HR and the PR and all of the different accolades or acronyms, ROI, right? And what God is, again, calling us to is the character. So without the being and without having places that we can just be, we are missing and ridding ourselves of the full amplification of what could happen in your infrastructure. So I'm excited about that. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how it continues to grow, because we are actually going to have our first gala, our first fundraiser connected to that the night before the event, which is an academy. So we're launching a founder academy, a full school that will go through the accreditation process as an alternative learning to public universities. And it is going to serve a lot of different avatars, ultimately under the understanding of that faith and business collision, where it's ordination and sustaining of marketplace ministers.
Wow, that is going to be so impactful. So, I mean, I feel like I'm definitely going to be in that
Yeah,
room. So,
it's gonna be
I mean,
so good.
I want to be there. Wow. I mean, everything that you just said, I know for myself, I used to separate faith and business, even in my corporate job,
Yeah.
in my entrepreneurial journey. And when I started really marrying it and seeing it come together, that's when I started really coming into this place of intrinsic motivation, being internally compelled, really understanding the calling and then the current assignment that God has for me, and how I can uniquely share what God has for me and be a blessing to others in a way that I share it. And it's been so beautiful. And everybody, you share it so beautifully as well. You share it differently than I do, and it's just been so wonderful bringing people together under a faith and having them really build a spiritual relationship and a faith of their own understanding has been so beautiful to see. So thank you so much for sharing about that. I can't wait to be in that room. And I also want to say thank you for taking that time out and sharing about that incubation period, because one of our beliefs that we think about in our company and that the conference is really built on is that personal development is the foundation to dynamic leadership, to meaningful relationships, to optimal health and extraordinary business outcomes. And so without that piece, Because what happens, something that we often talk about within our company, is your current level of success is the thing that's keeping you from your next level of success. And so that's what you'll get at the Amplify Your Life conference is, okay, you've reached this level of success. Now, how do we get to the next level of success? What does that look like? And it doesn't always mean leaving your corporate job. You could stay there, but show up as a completely different person and have different outcomes for yourself, for your family, for your teams. Or maybe it means growing your entrepreneurial journey. But as I say those words of your current level of success keeps you from your next level of success, was there ever a time that you had a challenge of letting go of one thing that was good in order to step into this next great thing? Could you share with us a little bit about that?
I feel like that's every day, Carmen. Every day I have to let go. And it drives me nuts, but it's ultimately like our natural tendency to control the outcome, right? I think of driving a
Mm,
steering wheel and I still have a car that is not self-propelling, self-driving. My husband doesn't. He drives a Tesla. And I remember the first time I was in there, I'm like, put your hands on the wheel. Like that cannot be safe. There's no way that it's going to follow the lines and it's going to turn for you and it's going to stop for you and it's going to create the safe boundaries. But it does. It actually works. And so what I think about when I think about that is I have to get to a level of trust that if I were to slow down, if I were to take every Friday off, if I were to start my day later for my meetings and appointments or shorten the hours associated to said meetings, if I was to, these are some things I'm actually doing, by the way,
mhm,
if I was to lay this whole sector of my business down, such as coaching, so that I can focus on writing and presenting and speaking, what would that look like from an HR perspective? What would that look like from an identity shift perspective? And I think that is really what it is. My original coach that I first had said, your identity precedes your destiny. And I always loved
mm,
that. And it's really connected to what you and I already teach. But it's this knowledge point that if I can't be the best version of myself for the sake of leadership, how can I ever learn to delegate well? And so that's been a tension that I've had to toy around with because I have people who want to volunteer for my company all the time. Like legit, they're just like, I just want to volunteer my time. What do you need help with? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I want you to do this and this and this. And I give people tasks really easily. And I realized I did something wrong in that. First off, I didn't have effective systems for said task to train them up. I didn't have capacity to train them up because I was just like data dumping and dumping something on them so that I could do something else, which didn't make way for me to be the effective leader to hold their hand in the process. Remember, these are volunteers, not experts. So they did need my hand holding. And I had to check myself very quickly when I was realizing that I was like treading water and I was going under. I'm like, God, you've given me all these gifts of volunteers and I'm so grateful. And yet I don't feel like I can steward them because you've called me into all of this operation. And he took me back and he said, you can't get there faster unless you first fast for me. Okay. And I
mm,
just thought, oh gosh, I get so eager because I see it and I
mm,
taste it and I know what it feels like to be in the goodness and the grace of what it feels like when you're in rhythm and motion and service. And yet I have to remember that the pace that I put on myself or the world projects onto me is the very same pace that left me into that rat wheel where I was at a screeching halt moment in my life. And I don't want any of that. And so I
mm,
had to take my hands even off the reins of volunteerism and what does that look like from a leadership capacity so that I could go back to the incubator season for my business and do the systematic SOPs and processes that need to be in play for new people to come in. So we can do that with our own lives. It doesn't even matter if you're not an entrepreneur. I remember a couple years ago when I got someone to clean my house. And then after cleaning my house, I'm like, can you do my laundry? Oh my gosh, you do laundry. And then I just came into Instacart Whole Foods delivery as of like 3 weeks ago. It's been life changing. And so we have to think about how can this help the ecosystem of my life? How can I make these other tasks that are medial that I don't need to be doing that don't bring me joy? And how can I give them to people that will support the mission that actually does bring them joy and does bring purpose to their life? And that goes back to not focusing on self, but focusing on people. So if we're focused on people, prosperity is inevitable.
Mm. Wow, so many places that I want to go with that. I mean, I'm sure everybody's frantically writing notes. I was writing some notes. Okay, so first thing, I want to go back to something that you said was, you had this good thing of all the volunteers, but the great thing was God was like, no, there's something better for you, but you just need to have this infrastructure in place. And I always say how aligned we are. So I hired one person for this like operations position. It didn't work out. So I took so much time to find a new person, and I got this new person. And then I was in the exact same position that you were in. I didn't have the capacity to fully train them. They were skilled, but not necessarily exactly what I needed. It looked good. It looked so good. And I love her so much. And she is so amazing, but it just wasn't the great thing. And so then peeling back that and being okay with, parting ways, and everything was wonderful. But it's like, okay, God really told me, Carmen, you need to do the work for yourself and increase your own capacity, because there's more, but you need to be doing more of the right things.
That's right.
And when you hire the next person, guess what? They're going to need to have more skill and more knowledge than you do.
Yes.
And congratulations, check your ego at the door, because that's what you need. You need someone that is highly skilled. And so it's like I'm in this period now of where I'm doing a lot again, but I'm inviting it in, and I'm open to it. And just like you said, with some changes that you're making this year, being very planful. I'm very focused on what is that, there's the Pareto's principle idea of planning 80 and 20%. 20% is the things that really move the needle. Like, what is my 20% today? That gets done every single day, and I'm committed to that, so that I can have the capacity and the systems when this person comes, that they'll just come in and be able to just rock and roll, right?
Yeah. And they do exist, and it does
They do.
exist. And I have
Yes.
been so blessed to have a COO and CFO that have come to save the day, because honestly, like financials and systems and all, I'm like, I don't want to do that. I can if I put my energy into it. We all can, but do I want to do that? Am I made to do that? It is not. If you guys have ever read The Big Leap, I highly recommend it. It is not my zone of excellence, and it's not my zone of genius. It's my zone of competency. I can do it, sure. But like you said, I would be spending 80% of my day doing that when I should be doing the 20% that moves the needle. That would be in my zone of excellence. And that 80% would eventually be taken over by the person who can do it at their highest capacity, at their level of genius. I want people to come in, and I believe this will happen for us as we continue to focus on our capacity in those systems, that actually, like you said, check our ego, but more so, they come with ideas. They don't need us to train them on this thing. They say, hey, this is something I used at my last company. This is something I think would be really beneficial here. And they actually have solutions, and they actually have the problem solving skills, and they actually have the gumption and the initiation to do that, rather than waiting for me to be like, okay, I need you to do X, Y, and Z today. Those things will happen, but I want them to do it with their ingenuity. And that's something that I am really focused in on. And I know that there's more for my team in that regard, but it is not easy. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I love that, because when we do that with our team members, then it empowers them. I think so many leaders get frustrated because they tell their team over and over again, they're not taking the initiative. It's like, well, what are you doing to empower them? How are you showing them and playing up on their skills and empowering them to do their role? Or are you micromanaging and that sort of thing? So yeah, I have full faith that the right person is going to come at the right time. And I'm willing in this season to do the work that I need to do, which feels hard sometimes, but it's also, then I can come back to that compelling vision on the inside and be like, this is why I'm doing this, and know that it's all for a purpose.
Can I give you a quick little revelation though I had just recently? I was on my pedal.
Please.
I do the Pedal and Preach on Tuesday mornings. And it's my favorite time to like loosely just talk with my community. I have no agenda. I don't have an outline. I don't have anything. And I just allow myself to share from a vulnerable state. And I
Is
had
this in
just
your
been
membership or
no,
on
it's free.
Instagram
It's
or?
open. It's on Facebook
Okay.
and Instagram every Tuesday
Okay.
at 6:30 a.m. So if you're in Oregon, you'll be sleeping, but it'll be there later when you come back. And then
Because
I
Eastern
drop
Standard Time.
right, Eastern Standard. And I drop it on the podcast, the Messenger Movement podcast every Thursday. So I was sitting there and I had just been having a conversation with someone who was like, I've been working on this for 6 years. And I'm like, oh, wow, me too. And she's like, yeah, but look what you have to show for it versus what I have to show for it. And it wasn't a comparison thing, but that was really where her mind was like, I haven't done anything. And we started ideating about what she could do in that moment to get closer to the vision. And I'm sitting on my bike and I'm telling this story and I start crying. And I realize what I had been doing with these volunteers, what I had been doing even with a partnership that happened last January. So Lord, help me. I'm still learning the lessons, the same lesson over again, just in a different context. I had basically let my 6-year-old go to another parent and assume that that parent can take care of my child like I can take care of my child. So if you think about your business as a
Mm-hmm.
baby and you're just like
Mm-hmm.
pawning them off on another person and saying you need X, Y, and Z and they'll be fed and they'll be happy and you'll be good to go. But they don't know how she likes to wear her hair. They don't know how she likes to hold my hand when we cross the street. They don't know how she likes to hold my hand when she falls asleep. Like they don't know her. And so if we think about our business like that, even though we have to expand our capacity and do more in this season, we have the beauty of being in process with a baby business that's one day going to flourish to the point that we'll be able to hand it over and not feel like, oh my gosh, my baby's going to somebody else, but instead they'll be empowered to be in those places. So I literally was crying about this because I realized, wow, I wasn't stewarding what I had been gifted well enough to give the right systems, the right infrastructure, the right tools, tactics, and processes to take care of it well. And you will implode a business or any mission if you bring in the wrong people or the right people at the wrong time. And that's what I had done because my people were right. They were amazing, but it was the wrong time.
Wow. I hope people rewind that and listen again. All too often we get to a place where we're passionate and then we don't have the right systems or people or personal development in place.
Yeah.
We haven't really built that identity within us. And so then we get to a place that this passion is now going to burn out and stress and overwhelm. So then we think we need to delegate it out and we start doing that and not in the right way, right?
Yep.
Not in an
Yep.
empowering, compelling vision, transformational leadership type way. And so then, it sounds like what I hear you saying is we've both done that. And I know that people listening can relate to this. This can happen within teams in a corporate environment. I know
Yes.
when I worked my corporate job, there was 2 times I can think of specifically where I rushed a hiring decision because I wanted to fill the seat. I never did that again. And people above me would put pressure on me and I'm like, nope, I need to have the right person. It's so imperative that this seat is filled with the right person, not only for this skill set, but with this particular dynamic in this team that I'm leading right now. And the same thing in our businesses as entrepreneurs as well. Because like, I love what you said. It could be the right people at the wrong time or just the wrong people, but it's being intentional. Going back to that intention. That's what I feel right now.
Totally.
There's tension, but
Yeah.
it's for the right reason. And as we talk about people, you've mentioned a couple of times during this conversation, it's about people and having an ecosystem and people. And one of the things that we really know and believe is we all have unique abilities, like what you said, what you were sharing about like your zone of genius versus zone of competency. We all have these unique abilities about us. But when that ends, then what? And a question I really started asking myself last year was any time that I asked myself, how do I do this? I started changing it to who do I need to help me do this? Because where our unique abilities end, where that skill set ends, that's where our network begins. And that's really the catalyst to our next level. And you've sort of mentioned that a couple of times. And I feel like you're going to share a little bit about that at the Amplify Your Life conference, but Share with us what you mean about people, and then I want to hear about a little bit about what we're going to learn from you at the Amplify Your Life conference.
Yeah, so good. I think first off, I had never heard the way that you said that just now. I've never heard it said in that particular context. So I'm going to be doing rewinding of the show too, because I'm like, oh, that's really good. But the not how do I do this, but who do I need to do this, or to give me the insight or the wisdom to do it too, right? It's not
Correct.
necessarily that you have to hire or bring
Correct.
somebody in or pay them even, because God does resource us really well. And that's something that I've come to see and find, that I have a connector spirit by heart. Like I am constantly thinking like, ooh, that person should know this person, this person should know this
Me
person.
too.
And when I'm in this environment with a lot of people, I am literally like mosaic building. I'm like, ooh, this will look beautiful here. This will look beautiful here. And
Mhm.
after my last conference, the concept was presented to me to someone who had never been inside of a local event type of community vibe with us. And he said, Tamra, I don't know why, but God has put inside of your sphere a lot of very impactful people. And you become this center connection fuse for them to gather. He's like, steward it well, and the blessings will be yours. And I thought, oh, that felt like a mantle moment, like a,
Wow.
oh my
Wow.
gosh, what if I get it
Hmm.
wrong, right? And it wasn't meant to add pressure or weight, but it was more of a eye-opening experience to say that if someone's in need, it's likely already been fulfilled through somebody else's hands. We don't have to be the end all be all. It's not about us. Remember, it's about others. And so when I am empathetically listening to people for lots of different reasons, I am thinking, how can I parallel them? And how will that parallel position not only them, but all of us together to rise? If you are thinking about other people first, you're thinking about the rise of the collective whole. And so around what I'm speaking to amplify your life is connected to this, is about turning your message into a movement. And a movement can only happen if there are multitudes, right? You cannot have a
Hmm.
movement by yourself. Otherwise, you're just an egocentric self ticking time bomb, really, is what's going to happen. And so if we're thinking about how do we move people, how do we compel people in to, whether it's our program, whether it's somebody else's event, whether it's the connection point for them to do something beautiful together or create together, ultimately we're creating a integration point that is unbreakable. There's this thing called a phalanx that was really common in like Roman wartime, and it's when everyone took their shields and they would link them together, and they would have their swords, ready, but they would literally link them so tightly that it could not break, and that's how they would march forward into the enemy's territory, because it was a protection zone, and if something did break down, the whole phalanx would fall over. And so it was really important for the strength and the interlocking to happen. And so this is where surface level relationships don't suffice for what it is that's meant to happen to make magic. And I think honestly, Carmen, when we had that energetic connection, when we were in that room, we didn't do the easy thing. We didn't say, cool, great to meet you, like have a great day. We did the hard thing. We kept in touch across state lines. We
Hmm.
kept in touch over years. We shared spaces together. We actually got to know one another. We celebrated each other's wins. And that is the deep level of interconnection that allows movements to happen. Because now you have a movement and I'm all in. And now I'm building a movement and you're all in. And it's not about one person's movement versus the other, because I believe there's an intersection point for all of these things, because it's all about bringing people to their highest sense of self. And that highest sense of self is ultimately this mastermind, this ultimate place that all of us get to resonate in an equal frequency, and we get to celebrate one another. And that's, I think, what I want more than anything, is like, I will be a laid down lover of others in order for us all to get to that place.
Mm. I'm like tearing up over here. Yes, 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 and more yes. And I can't wait for everyone to experience you in person at the conference, your energy and the movement that God is just moving through you. They're going to get so much from you. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And it is the hard thing to stay connected.
Yeah.
And that's why one of the things that we always talk about is being the one. You have to be the one. Everybody says, well, I'm always the one that does X, Y, or Z, or this or that. Guess what? When you're the one, then you can be the catalyst for others to be the one. We invite everyone to join us in being the one to show the world how truly great life is.
Yeah.
Because it is, even in the moments, even in the valleys that you talked about, the incubation periods. Look at what a testimony that you can have now, and how many people are inspired, not only inspired, how aspirational that is to other people, that they then are put into action around something in their life that God has put on their heart. And so being the one, yeah, you do have to be the one. And guess what? It's not always easy or comfortable. But when you do it and you build and you're highly resourced with a network, like what Tamra talked about, I feel like I'm the same way. I'm a connector. I can see people and, oh, great, let me connect you with this person. Like your publishing, anybody that's like, I'm interested in writing a book, let me connect you with my friend Tamra. She has a publishing house. You will love her. And so it's just being the one and being okay with being the one. And it's not always the easy part, but I'll tell you what, like it can really fill your heart when you're the one connecting people that are out there making a difference in the world. Once you separate yourself from having to be the one that gets the the recognition.
Yes, that's so good. And I think that would, if you guys are listening and you're like, okay, that was all really great. What's the one thing that I do? Honestly, if that's the one thing that we practice on a daily basis, even within our 20%, it is so easy for you to send a connecting email, to send a connecting text message, to send a connecting DM. And again, not for your glory, but for the story to evolve into something magnificent. And I love doing that. When I have somebody that drops in my spirit, I'm like, oh, I need to send them a message right now. And when I do that every single time, it's like, I would say 1% of the time, do people not respond? They respond with this concept of, oh my gosh, I needed that today. Wow. You have no idea how that blessed me. Wow. I'm struggling with something and this was so on point. And it is your prophetic gifting, everyone, not just you, Carmen. It is our ability to tap into what people say is your intuition. And when someone's dropped on your spirit in your network, don't let it go to waste. Take that moment, take that initiative. You're going to be better at the end of the day for it. It's going to fulfill your cup because it's filling theirs.
100%. This podcast, there is just so many gems. But as we wrap up, I was thinking about this idea of what are we doing differently this year?
Yeah.
Because it's just not enough to wake up, get on the treadmill of life, and do the same thing over and over again. It's this idea that I play with and talk about a lot, and just want to acknowledge for people is that at some point, all these silent shifts have happened and we've lost our sense of aliveness. Yep. And it shows up as discouragement often. And it just shows up as just going through the motions. And so in order to change that, we do have to do things differently internally, personally as well. Is there one thing personally that you can share with us that you're doing differently to make sure that you haven't lost your sense of aliveness, that you're showing up? Like you mentioned earlier in the conversation about building this identity and being the person that can match that calling, that assignment. Is there something that you're doing differently this year that you could share with us?
Yeah, it's probably not what you're expecting because it's not necessarily related to business, but I do believe that personal and professional life has that integration piece. So a couple of months ago at this point, I was asked to go get my blood work done by my husband. He's like, we're doing a new doctor, as a homeopathic functional medicine doctor. Let's go get blood work. I have not gotten blood work since I don't even know that I got blood work when I had babies, but I've not gotten blood work in a really long time. And so I went in and the doctor was sitting there and she's like, okay, well, tell me why you're here. I'm like, my husband asked me to come and I guess it's a good thing to do. And she's like, okay. And she's like, well, how do you feel overall? And I'm like, I feel good. Like the same energy. I feel great. She's like, okay, well, let me just ask you a series of questions. So she asked me a series of questions and each question she's like, oh. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I have a lot more problems than I think about because I move at this energy so much and I feel good. I feel good enough. And she said this, she said, Tamra, what got you here is not going to get you there. And so you might feel good, but what if you felt great. And your understanding of what good feels like is only because you've had these compounding issues that you have just taken as the new norm, taken as the new norm, taken as the new norm. And I found out through my blood work that I was having adrenal cortisol high increase of levels, which is essentially I could burn out. That my thyroid has, some issues, that I needed to be on supplements of a lot of different things to try and get these things under control, that my lack of libido is not because I'm stressed or I'm getting older or any of these things, but because of what was going on with my testosterone levels. And I am like, wow, I have a lot of issues. She started laughing and she said, we're going to fix that. So I'm on a 4-month detox, no dairy, no caffeine, no sugar, and no gluten. I have all of these supplements for the first time in my life. Am I taking morning supplements and evening supplements? I feel like a grandma with all of the pills that I'm popping in my mouth. And I am
Do you have
feeling,
your pill
yes,
container with your day of
colorful,
the
of
week?
course.
I've got one too. Don't worry.
But I feel good. I feel proud of myself for positioning myself as a priority, even though I thought that I already had. But our health is not just us working out and us feeling good. It's us actually knowing ourselves and knowing what we need and actually then taking that next step. It's an investment. It's a financial investment. It's a time investment. But I don't want to do just bare none to feel good. I do want to feel great. And I'm already seeing changes 3 weeks in. And that's coupled with all the things that I've done in the past. I still am 5 years alcohol free. There's a lot of things that I've done in my life to get to this place of feeling good, but I'm ready to feel great and alive.
I love that so much. We talk about one of the other beliefs that we talk about in our company is you can only reach your dreams and goals to the level your body can take it.
There it is.
And a couple of years ago, I went through a similar thing that you're going through, and I had to really do the work. My thing was I did a keto diet for 4 months, which was really challenging for me. A supplement protocol. I couldn't find the doctor to help me, so I studied under a doctor and got a female hormone certification so that I could learn and so that I could do it, so I could feel better.
Of course you did.
Right? And so it was
so
like,
good.
But feeling great, and each new season of our life takes a new version of us. And that's not only a new version of us mentally, personal development wise, but it's also physically and spiritually. It's always changing and growing and evolving. And you've just done that so beautifully over your life. I'm always in awe of you and your journey and how you show up. And you're just a true testament to just following, being faithful and following, putting yourself out there in a way that sometimes feels scary, but it's making a huge impact. And your message has created a huge movement. So I can't wait for everyone to hear from you and learn from you and connect with you and hug you in person at the Amplify Your Life event. Thank you so much for this conversation today. You don't know how much it just filled my heart and filled my soul, and it always does, all of our conversations.
I know. And I was like, we both have little heart necklaces on. Of course we do. We're simpatico, friend. And I'm so proud of you and the work that you do and the light that you give out to so many people. I know has been a safe harbor for many. So I'm excited to be in person and see all of the people that you've brought into your movement and to bless them, hopefully with lots of joy, because that's something I'm easily able to be resourced with, but also a lot of knowledge to break them into their next level of themselves.
I love that. Thank you so much for being here. And if you want to connect with Tamra, in the show notes, it'll be her publishing company, her FounderCon conference, her books, her Instagram, and make sure to connect with her after the podcast. So thank you so much.